it's ready to go once it's 5:30. And the recording. Okay, all of our text settings are ready to go. So as soon as it hits 5:30, you can start whenever you're ready, Catherine.
And Zachary, would you like me to read out the whole name of the application?
Generally, I believe that's what Jim does.
Okay.
Yeah. Our general motto is it's always better to include more than not enough. So
definitely a good motto then.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
All right, the time is 5:30. The hearing on application CU-SPR-ADJ-DAP-DR21-05 is now open. My name is Catherine Pratt. I'm going to be the hearings officer for tonight's hearing. This hearing will be conducted virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Testimony from neighborhood organizations and persons in favor or in opposition will be limited to those who signed up before 3 p.m. Tonight's order of proceedings shall be the staff report presented by Aaron Panko, Planner 3, the applicant's presentation limited to 15 minutes, the neighborhood report, if any, limited to 10 minutes, the testimony of those who signed up today before 3 p.m., and that will go in order of testimony in favor of the application, testimony in opposition, testimony that is neutral. After that, if the applicant so choose, they may rebut anything that is provided in the testimony from the neighborhood report or by the public, and any of that rebuttal should be limited in scope to the issues raised in opposition. After that, we'll be closing the hearing. So at this time, I'm going to direct your attention to the applicable criteria found in the notice. The testimony and evidence for the public hearing must be directed to these criteria. First is the conditional use permit pursuant to SRC 240.005D. An application for a conditional use permit shall be granted if the following criteria are met. 1, the proposed use is allowed as a conditional use in the zone. 2, the reasonable likely adverse impacts of the use on the immediate neighborhood can be minimized through the imposition of conditions. And 3, the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with and have minimal impact on the livability or appropriate development of surrounding property. Then there will be a Class 3 site plan review pursuant to SRC 220.005F3. An application for a Class 3 site plan review shall be granted if A, the application meets all applicable standards of the UDC, B, the transportation system provides for the safe, orderly, and efficient circulation of traffic into and out of the proposed development, and negative impacts to the transportation system are mitigated adequately, C, parking areas and driveways are designed to facilitate safe and efficient movement of vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, and D, the proposed development will be adequately served with city water, sewer, stormwater facilities, and other utilities appropriate to the nature of the development. Next will be a Class 2 adjustment pursuant to SRC 250.005D2. The construction or structural alteration of a building or structure which will result in increased usage of a public facility, provided, however, that any such construction or structural alteration undertaken in connection with the following shall not be considered development for purposes of this chapter. Any use established and conducted by the city. Finally, there'll be a Class 2 driveway approach permit. Oh, not finally, but next will be a Class 2 driveway approach permit for the 3 streets. Pursuant to SRC 804025D, a Class 2 driveway approach permit shall be granted if 1, the proposed driveway approach meets the standards of this chapter and the Public Works design standards. 2, no site conditions preventing placing the driveway approach in the required location. 3, the number of driveway approaches onto the arterial are minimized. 4, the proposed driveway approach, where possible, A, is shared with an adjacent property, or B, takes access from the lowest classification of street abutting the property. 5, the proposed driveway approach meets vision clearance standards. 6, the proposed driveway approach does not create traffic hazards and provides for safe turning movements and access. 7, the proposed driveway approach does not result in significant adverse impacts to the vicinity. 8, the proposed driveway approach minimizes impact to the functionality of adjacent streets and intersection. And 9, the proposed driveway approach balances the adverse impacts to residentially zoned property and the functionality of adjacent streets. Finally, there'll be a Class 1 design review, and pursuant to SRC 225.005E1, a Class 1 design review shall be approved if all of the applicable design review standards are met. Now that the criteria have been addressed, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunities to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeal based on that issue. Failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds to the holding of this hearing? Seeing none. Application CU SPR AJD DAP DR 2105, application for 4900 block of State Street, Salem, Oregon 97301 is now open. I would ask Aaron Planko to read the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening here. Share my screen. Are you able to see the screen over here? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Aaron Panko with the Community Development Department. I appreciate you reading the criteria there. For the adjustment, I just want to make sure it's SRC Chapter 250 005, and the criteria for a Class 2 adjustment is found in subsection D2. So I'm not going to read the entire thing there. I just want to make sure that to point people in the right place there. This is a conditional use permit, site plan review, adjustment, design review for property at the 4900 block of State Street. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments. And this is a vicinity map of the subject property. So the portion that's subject to the apartment proposal for tonight is at the lower southeast corner of the property near State Street and Cordon Road. State Street is designated as a major arterial to the south. Cordon Road is designated as a parkway street, and Cordon Road is also the urban growth boundary. So the property is right up against the urban growth boundary. The property also has frontage on a future collector street that's going to be constructed with the East Park Plan Unit Development. Comes up from Auburn and goes to the property on the west side. And this is a zoning map of the property. The property was rezoned to CR retail commercial, with surrounding properties rezoned to a combination of residential designations in 2010 as part of a voter approved annexation. The proposed development of the 291 unit multifamily residential use occurs on the CR retail commercial zone portion of the property. To the north of the proposed development is also property that's zoned CR retail commercial. That's the location of a future city park. The property that's not shaded on the map and located south of State Street is outside city limits in Marion County. It's primarily developed with single family residential uses. To the west of the property is RM2 multifamily residential zoning designation. It's part of the East Park Estates planned unit development. And that PUD included a 36 unit apartment complex that directly abuts the proposed 291 unit apartment complex. So on the site plan, you'll see 36 units shown in the top left corner. And further to the west of the property, also this area that's not shaded is outside city limits. And the area abutting this is the Penn Oak Mobile Home Park. So this is an aerial photo of the subject property. It's a large undeveloped property here, and they're proposing to develop here in the lower portion of the screen. On the other side of Corden Road is Marion County, and you can see some of the single family uses there to the south. And this is the proposed site plan that shows the 291 units here. There's access that comes in off of State Street that's shown on the plan. You can see where Greencrest, the future Collector Street, comes in, and there's a driveway access into the site. We have the 36 units that have already been approved as part of the PUD over in this portion. And we have a future commercial development that's not part of this application, that's directly abutting the site. This is a photo taken from Corden Road, looking southwest towards the property. And this is a photo taken on State Street, looking east. So Corden Road, the intersection at Corden Road would be over here. You can see the property over here to the left. And beyond Corden Road is that property that's in Marion County. So multifamily residential uses require a conditional use permit in the CR retail commercial zone. As mentioned, the property was subject to a voter-approved annexation and zone change to CR retail commercial. The conceptual plan was provided at this time, as well as showing how the CR zoned property could be developed. The property was approved with the commercial zoning designation to serve the existing surrounding residential area and the new residential developments that occur on the East Park Plain unit development. The nearest commercially zoned properties are located roughly 1 mile to the west on Lancaster Drive. And approximately 19 acres of commercially zoned land was reserved on the property to address the deficit of commercial services in the surrounding area. However, of that 19 acres, approximately 6.25 acres are going to be dedicated as a future city park. And this proposed multifamily use would occupy approximately 10.77 acres, leaving only 7% of the land that was originally envisioned for commercial development available for actual commercial use. Staff has further provided an analysis of the conceptual plan approved at the time of annexation with the proposal and concluded that the plan is not in substantial conformance and the director cannot approve a substitution, modification, or alternative to the conceptual plan. In general, the proposed multifamily residential use is found to be compatible with the surrounding area. However, the proposed site plan indicates that a future gasoline service station with a convenience store and drive-through use will be developed, sharing driveway access, interior drive aisles, and abutting this multifamily use with no separation. The proposal does not protect the residential areas from these intensive commercial uses and is therefore not in compliance with the comprehensive plan policies regarding screening, outdoor storage, and lighting. So due to these reasons, staff finds that the proposed plan does not minimize any reasonably likely adverse impacts on the surrounding area and recommends that the hearings officer deny the conditional use permit. For the site plan review, the site plan review process ensures that any new development is in compliance with the development standards of the zoning code. In general, standards include maximum building height allowances, setbacks, off-street parking standards, landscaping, and solid waste service area requirements. Pursuant to Chapter 220, a site plan review application shall be granted if the application meets all applicable standards of the UDC. The staff report provides an analysis of applicable standards to this project, and the application was found to have a few deficiencies. Specifically, the proposal does not comply with uses permitted in the CR zone. So multifamily uses require a conditional use permit, and staff is recommending denial of the conditional use permit. So the conditional use permit application would need to be approved in order to approve the site plan review. Second, the minimum building setbacks required adjacent to interior property lines, including the commercial zone property to be developed as the convenience store and gas station, are not provided in a way that meets applicable standards. There would be a landscape buffer along this boundary here between the two uses in order to comply with those standards. And finally, the proposed driveway access to State Street does not comply with applicable standards for driveway approaches on arterial streets. And staff is recommending that this driveway approach on State Street not be approved. For the Class 2 adjustments, the applicant has requested 3 adjustments to the multifamily design standards in Chapter 702. Including an adjustment to allow an off-street parking area next to a street instead of behind a building. So you can see this portion of the parking area is in front of building 29, up next to the street instead of beside or behind the building. An adjustment to allow the setback distance to increase next to State Street and Cordon Road. The code requires a minimum 5-foot setback and the applicant is requesting 20-foot setback. And then an adjustment to eliminate the direct pedestrian access standard for dwelling units that are next to State Street and Cordon Road. So findings in the staff report address each of these adjustment requests. And to quickly summarize, staff is recommending that the adjustments be approved only if the hearings officer decides to approve the conditional use permit and site plan review applications. We had no concerns with the adjustment request. For the design review, multifamily residential development is subject to design review standards of Chapter 702, which provides some additional standards for open space, landscaping, site safety and security, parking, and site design, facade and building design. The applicant has requested those 3 adjustments to some of those multifamily residential standards. However, staff has noted a few additional areas where the application materials do not demonstrate compliance with development standards in Chapter 702. The most notable is a lack of pedestrian access between the off-street parking area and buildings 23 and 28. You can see highlighted here, most of the areas do include pedestrian pathways around the buildings between the parking areas and those buildings. This area here does not include that pedestrian pathway. And then as well, there's a lack of windows provided in habitable rooms on some of the building elevations. And we have some examples here of a habitable room with no window provided on that building elevation. With significant changes also likely being required for this proposal to work, including the removal of the driveway on State Street and providing more space dedicated to commercial services. Staff recommend that the hearings officer deny the design review application at this time. We did send out public notice of the proposal. We did receive comments back from the East Lancaster Neighborhood Association indicating that they had voted unanimously to oppose the driveway location on State Street. We did not receive any other public comments for this. We did receive comments from Salem Kaiser School District, and those are included in the record. And so for the reasons outlined in the staff report, staff is not supportive of the conditional use permit, and significant changes are needed to the layout and design of the site. Therefore, staff recommends that the hearings officer deny the consolidated applications. Thank you.
Would it be appropriate if I could ask some questions right now before the applicant makes their presentation, or should I wait?
Whatever you like.
So I just had a really quick question about the criteria regarding the buffer zone between a commercial use and a residential use. You mentioned that you would generally require some kind of a landscaping buffer zone. What would be kind of the dimensions of that? I'm just looking at the map and kind of what you would be expecting as something that would comply with those standards.
In the CR zone, I'm going to try to pull this up here real quick. I believe it's a 10-foot setback that's going to be required for multifamily uses when they abut a commercial property. Give me 1 second, it's going to pull up here. Yeah, multifamily abutting an interior property line like this would be a 10-foot setback. So that's what you'd see on the development side. And then for commercial development, abutting commercial development, I don't believe there's a building setback, but there would be a 5-foot vehicle use area setback. So the combination between the two, you'd see a buffer between those two uses.
All right, thank you. I just wanted a little bit more information about that since
Sure.
you gave an example. I also remember in the staff report, there was an issue with one of the driveways being that it crossed a lot line, except it wasn't the staff report indicated it wasn't a driveway, it was a drive aisle. I just wanted to make sure that that's the driveway that would exit out onto Greencrest.
Are you still able to see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, so the driveway or drive aisle setback is the interior setback. So that it's the same thing I was mentioning. There should be that 10-foot setback on the multifamily piece of this. And there are cases where a shared driveway is allowed, but when you have parking like this next to it, this becomes a drive aisle instead of a driveway. So there is a distinction there, and this shared drive aisle is not allowed over the property line.
Okay, I was confused which part of the driveway drive aisle where that was being referred to. I didn't understand if that was the exit out of the property that goes to the Greencrest, or if it was the actual kind of perimeter that abuts next to the commercial property.
Yeah, we're talking about the interior here, not the actual driveways here.
All right. All right, I think those are the questions I have for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to report in your staff report?
That's it at this time. Thank you.
All right, in that case, I will take the applicant's testimony now.
Joseph, at this time, you can go ahead and unmute and turn on your camera. And don't
Yep,
forget to state your name and business address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Schaefer on behalf of East Park LLC. The address is 2 Center Point Drive, 6th floor in Lake Oswego. The zip code is 97035. I will speak for a few minutes about the project background, and then the attorney, Ed Tromke, will address the legal issue. There's Ed right next to me. Say hi, Ed. The East Park site was annexed into the city in 2001, and at that time, urban zoning was applied, including a variety of city zones, all of which allow residential use. However, Cordon Road, the urban arterial which forms the east boundary of the site, was not annexed and remains subject to Marion County's jurisdiction. The site is also subject to a 2011 development agreement with the county, which affects improvements on Cordon Road. And I see Tony is on the call tonight. I'm sure he could answer any detailed questions you have about that. In October 2019, the city approved the plan unit development application for the entire project. As part of that approval, the zoning map was changed slightly. That approval is subject to follow-up land use reviews, including follow-up final plat reviews for each phase of the subdivision, as well as a minor modification to address the slight boundary encroachment and the sort of applications we have in front of us tonight. Consistency with the annexation concept plan was not an approval criterion in any of those land use approvals. For this site plan review, for development of a portion of the site zoned CR, the annexation concept plan was also not mentioned by the city as an approval criterion in the pre-app, in the application completeness review, nor in many informal communications. It was first raised in the staff report last Wednesday. Since 2019, the project team has developed civil engineering designs for the infrastructure serving the project, including Cordon Road. And Mark and Jeremy have had the lead on that. Marion County was clear that it does not want the right-in, right-out access shown on the annexation concept plan. That access led directly to the largest commercial building and its truck loading dock. When Marion County asked that the Cordon Road access be eliminated, the viability of the commercial uses was no longer assured. The project was thus caught between the concept plan and the county's desire to eliminate the access that was essential for the commercial users. In combination with other challenges facing this retail development, it was considered unlikely the retail development could succeed. At the same time, the need for more apartments in Southeast Salem is well known. There are no other large apartment developments near this site. Apartments are an allowed conditional use in the RC zone, and we decided to build apartments. We think the conditional use criteria and the criteria for modification of a conceptual annexation plan are satisfied. I would welcome any questions from the hearings officer, and then we'll turn it over to Ed.
All right, give me 1 second while I look over my notes. So you mentioned that you think that it complies with the conditional use, the criteria to receive a conditional use permit. I am limited to looking at the 3 criteria listed in SRC 240.005D. It looks like I know one of the exhibits was a memo written by the applicant. I don't know if that was you or one of your partners, but based on what I have, I don't yet have testimony from you about adverse impacts to surrounding area, or I think what I heard you just say about there's no apartments nearby maybe goes to the standard about compatibility with minimal impact on surrounding property, but I just want to make sure that I get testimony related to that as well.
Okay, I'll speak in general terms. We're kind of new to this topic, and as Ed will explain, we'll submit a lengthy hearing memo later on. But to answer your question directly, in terms of adverse impacts to the surrounding area, you know, the staff talks about the adverse impacts of having residential uses next to our proposed gas station and convenience store. Well, I think that kind of proves the point that there's an inherent land use conflict between residential and commercial. So how would it be if we put, 17 acres of commercial next to our residential? We feel by definition, additional residential uses will have less impact on the adjacent properties than our proposed residential uses. In terms of lighting, in terms of truck traffic, all sorts of, all the land use conflicts that are inherent between commercial and residential. In addition, and we'll be submitting a memo from our traffic engineer, but in addition, the apartments will generate substantially less PM peak hour traffic than the retail commercial would. So you'll be seeing more evidence about that. We think less rush hour traffic is a good thing.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else you want to add before the next applicant speaker makes their presentation?
No, I just thank you, and I'll pass it over here to Ed Tromke, who's next to me here.
All right.
Thank you, Joseph. And good evening, Madam Hearings Officer. My name is Ed Tromke, and I'm an attorney representing the applicant. Address is 2 Center Point Drive, 6th floor, Lake Oswego, 97035, the same as Joseph, who just spoke to you. And as Joseph mentioned, we were surprised by the unexpected application of new criteria last week. And to address those criteria, we need some more time to prepare both evidence and testimony. And as Joseph mentioned, one of the things we're looking at is traffic evidence. And evidence is not easy to get over the holidays because everybody is busy and trying to spend some time with their families. So with that said, I'm going to first just summarize my initial impressions of the case, and then I'd like to listen to the testimony of any members of the public who wish to speak, and at that point we may have a little follow-up. But we've spoken to Mr. Pankow and understand that January 26th is a suitable date for a continued hearing. So we want to request that after tonight's hearing is, after tonight's testimony is concluded, that the hearing be continued to January 26th. We're happy, of course, to extend the 120-day deadline by 35 days, which would push it out until May 5th to accommodate the hearings officer's needs for more time after the continued hearing. And so I'd ask if that would work for the hearings officer. If so, that would be great, and we can keep this to a fairly high-level review because we do want to submit some significant evidence and legal discussion, which I'll outline for you here in a moment.
All right. I don't know if the best decision way to go about this is to make sure that if we're going to do a continuance that we set that at the end of the hearing, or if I just do that now. I would be amenable to an extension to a continued hearing, keeping the record open between that now and then with the extension of the 120-day period. As long as we can also have the extension, I don't think that would be a problem.
No, the extension is not a problem.
Okay, so as long as staff have approved the January 26th hearing time, then I think that's an appropriate, we can do that then.
Thank you, Madam Hearings Officer. So on the legal issues, please understand that our work on the project to date has been focused on infrastructure development agreements with the city and sanitary sewer pump stations and with the county on Cordon Road. And so I'm not really fully up to speed on the prior land use decisions, which applied the CR zoning to the portion of the site that's at issue in this application. I do know that the final land use decisions are final and they can't be collaterally attacked in this proceeding. The 2019 PUD approval expressly authorized residential and park uses on a substantial portion of the commercial area that was illustrated in the annexation concept plan. And the concept plan was not applied as an approval criterion in 2019, and we didn't know that it would be until we got the staff report. The second legal issue has to do with Cordon Road access. The city wants to insist on strict application of the annexation concept plan or conceptual plan, and the access is an essential feature of that plan. I want to emphasize that the applicant here, my client, develops retail projects and is just finishing up a retail project in the city of Molalla right now. It would build more retail on this location if it were feasible to do so, but it's not. And we'll be providing evidence, which we have to gather right now. We've got preliminary evidence. So we'll be providing evidence on the lack of demand for retail uses on this location, which is at the very edge of the urban growth boundary, as well as evidence of the numerous retail spaces that are currently available for lease in Southeast Salem. So marketability and absorption is a huge issue in developing retail versus housing. It's also an issue, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Returning to the Cordon Road access, as I understand it, only the county has authority to grant that access, and the county isn't in favor of granting it. Convenient access is absolutely essential to retail users. We've been trying to satisfy both the city and the county in this, and this firm represents both cities, counties, and developers. So we understand how sometimes it's accommodations have to be made, and that's what we're looking at in this instance. So we thought we were complying with both government's needs in getting this far by foregoing the access and providing needed housing instead. And we will be talking to both in the interim between now and the 26th as we continue to develop evidence for this. Governor Brown, as you know, intends to dramatically increase the number of affordable homes throughout Oregon by supporting the growth of housing supply. That's a quote from her 1918 executive. It has the force of an executive order, even though it isn't one. It's simply a document that she issued. We will provide evidence for the record that my client is providing more needed housing supply in Salem by far than any other entity, public or private. And this is merely one piece of that continuing process of providing affordable workforce housing in the Mid-Valley area, not just in Salem, but in Salem. And the city really does need these 291 apartments. Policy setting aside, the term needed housing has a very important legal meaning. At a glance, it appears that the staff report applies numerous criteria to these apartments that are not clear and objective standards as required by ORS 197.307 sub 4. We will be exploring that in the weeks to come. We'll be speaking to Mr. Panko about it, and we'll also be providing evidence and arguments to you, Madam Hearings Officer, about the needed housing requirements that the laws have changed in the last couple of years on that. And we, as city attorneys, are working with our client cities to update codes. And this code appears to need updating in that same sort of way, but everybody's busy, and we get it, that it's not easy to do to get these things updated. So all of these issues will be described in more detail in a written memorandum for your use and for Mr. Panko's use at the continued hearing. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but if not, thank you for listening to my 100,000-foot overview of what we would like to present.
So I definitely think that at this point, it would probably be more fruitful for me to wait for your memo and anything else that you submit into the record before the continued hearing date. That way I am better able to address the exact concerns that you bring up in that memo. And at this point, it sounds like there are other issues that you're going to be addressing besides just the criteria that the staff have outlined for today's application. So if that sounds about right, then I don't think I have any questions for you right now.
So then thank you very much, Madam Hearings Officer, and we will be providing more. The video apparently went off while I was talking, so I apologize for that, but as long as you could hear me, you don't need to see me too. Thank you and good evening.
Of course. And my only request, and I guess this is also to Mr. Panko, is that in anything else that gets submitted to the record between now and the January 26th date, that it also addresses the applicable criteria for the various portions of this application, because again, that is part of the decision that I have to, that's what I'm basing the decision on regarding these applications. So I just need to make sure that that is also being addressed in that memo outside of the legal arguments that you're making.
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your accommodation.
Is there anyone else testifying on behalf of the applicant? All right, doesn't look like there is. Is there a neighborhood representative that's going to be testifying tonight?
And we do not have any members of the neighborhood association present tonight.
All right, and then no one present from the public that's here to testify as well.
That's correct. There are no members of the public present.
All right, in that case, because we have set the hearing continuation for January 26th, I believe that's going to be at 5:30, right, Mr. Pinko? Right, okay.
Correct. Yep.
So I'm going to hold the record open until that time as well. Any party, including the applicant, members of the public and neighborhood association or neighborhood representative, can submit materials into the record if they so choose. I'm not sure in terms of notice requirements. I believe the city will be handling that for the continuation hearing. Okay.
Yes, we will.
All right. And then for the record, the applicant has agreed to extend the 120-day application decision deadline by 35 days. And so that was a date in May, you said? I think
May 5, we is the way we computed it. Is that correct, Aaron?
I calculated May 5th. Yep.
Yes.
all right. All right, so since that's in the record, I don't think at this point we have anything to do. I can close the hearing unless anyone has any objection to that, and we will continue this hearing on January 26th at 5:30. All right, thank you. And the time is now 6:10 and the hearing is closed for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.